The galaxy had known peace for 4,000 years. Not a small peace between two planets or three species, but a true peace that covered every corner of known space. And it was humanity who had built it. Admiral Park Taiho stood at the window of his office on Earth, watching the sun set over the ocean. He was 58 years old, and he had never seen a war. His father had never seen a war. His grandfather and his grandfather's grandfather. Stretching back 160 generations, none of them had ever fired a weapon at another living being. This was humanity's greatest pride, but Taiho knew the truth that others had forgotten. Humans had not become peaceful because they were weak. They had become peaceful because they remembered what they were capable of. Long ago. Before the Covenant of Silence, humanity had fought in the Great War. 3 species had nearly died completely. Worlds had burned. Stars had been poisoned. The death count had reached numbers so high that they stopped having meaning. And when the smoke cleared, it was a human general who had looked at the destruction and said, "Never again." The Covenant of Silence was born from that promise. Every species in the galaxy signed it. War became illegal. Weapons became tools of history. And humanity, more than any other species, held to this promise with an almost religious devotion. Now, 4,000 years later, younger species looked at humans and saw something soft, something easy to push. Far from Earth, on a small moon called Eris 4, Dr. Kong Yuna was finishing her night shift. She was the chief medical director of Sanctuary 7, a hospital station that floated above the moon's gray surface. The station was beautiful in its simplicity. White walls, clean air, and beds for 2,000 patients. It belonged to no government. It served no flag. Anyone who was sick or hurt could come here and receive care. Yuna had worked here for 20 years. She had treated humans, of course, but also the tall gray beings from Altair, the small furry creatures from the Rim worlds, and even soldiers from the Velith Dominion. The Velith were a proud warrior species. They had joined the galactic community only 300 years ago, and they had never fully accepted the peace. They saw it as a chain around their necks. But when their soldiers got sick, and their children needed surgery, they came to Sanctuary 7 like everyone else. Yuna treated them all the same. Tonight, she sat beside a dying Velith soldier. He was old, his gray-blue skin fading to white, his 4 eyes cloudy with age. He had come to the station with a disease that had no cure. Yuna could only make him comfortable. "Doctor," the old Velith whispered. His voice was like dry leaves. Yuna leaned closer. "I am here. They are coming." His hand, cold and rough, grabbed her wrist. Not for war. For a message. They want to show the galaxy that humans are nothing. That your peace is weakness. Yuna felt her heart grow cold. Who is coming? But the old soldier's eyes had closed. His grip loosened. A moment later, he was gone. Yuna sat in silence for a long time. Then she stood and walked to the communication room. She needed to send a message to Earth. In another part of the station, a young nurse named Bei Minho was feeding a baby. The baby was human, only 3 months old. Brought to the station by parents who had been traveling through the sector when their ship broke down. The mother was still in surgery. The father sat in the waiting room, his face gray with worry. Minho was 24 years old. He had become a nurse because he believed in what Sanctuary 7 represented. In a galaxy full of different species, different languages, different histories, this station was proof that kindness was universal, that compassion needed no translation. He looked down at the baby who had fallen asleep in his arms. So small, so fragile, so completely trusting. "I will keep you safe," he whispered. "That is what we do here." On Earth, Counselor Yoon Hannah received Dr. Kong's message at midnight. She read it 3 times, her face showing nothing. Then she called Admiral Taiho. "Could be nothing," she said. "The words of a dying man." "Could be," Taiho agreed. "But the Velith Dominion has been growing bolder. They test our borders. They send ships too close to our stations. They talk of expansion. They would not attack a hospital. Hannah's voice was firm. No species would. It would turn the entire galaxy against them. Perhaps Tai-Ho said slowly, that is exactly what they want. To show that humans will not fight back. That our peace is empty. That we have become prey. Hannah was quiet. Then she asked, and if they do attack, what will we do? It was a question that had not been asked in 4,000 years. Tai-Ho thought of the vault beneath Geneva. The sealed doors that had not been opened since before his great-great-grandmother was born. The secrets that humanity had kept, even from itself. I do not know, he said. I pray we never have to find out. But deep in his heart, in the part of him that carried the memory of his ancestors, Admiral Park Tai-Ho felt something stir. Something old. Something that had been sleeping for 40 centuries. Humanity had chosen peace. They had chosen it every day for 4,000 years. But choice was the key word. They had chosen, and what could be chosen could also be set aside in the darkness of space. 40 warships moved silently toward Erisfor. Their weapons were armed. Their orders were clear, and their commander, a Velith warlord named Keth, smiled as he watched the small hospital station grow larger on his screen. Tonight, he said to his officers, we teach the humans what their peace is worth. He had no idea what he was about to awaken. The night cycle had begun on Sanctuary 7. The lights in the hallways had dimmed to a soft blue, and most of the patients were sleeping. 2,000 souls from 12 different species rested in the wards, trusting that they were safe. Dr. Kang Yuna had not slept. She stood in her office, reading reports, unable to shake the dying soldier's words from her mind. She had sent her warning to Earth hours ago. All she could do was wait. Lieutenant Cho Sunwoo walked the halls with his small team. 6 security officers for the entire station. They carried no weapons because Sanctuary 7 was neutral ground. Their job was to break up arguments and help lost visitors find their rooms. Nothing more. Sunwoo was 29 years old, tall and quiet. He had taken this job because he wanted to help people without hurting anyone. His mother had been a nurse here 30 years ago. She had always told him that Sanctuary 7 was the best of humanity, a place where healing mattered more than politics. He stopped by the children's ward and looked through the window. 12 children slept inside, some human, some alien. Among them was a small Velith girl, only 5 years old. She had been found floating in an escape pod after her family's ship was destroyed by pirates. No one knew her name. The nurses called her Tira, which meant star in an old Earth language. Nurse Oh Boyong, 70 years old, with white hair and gentle hands, was checking on the children. She had worked at the station for 50 years. She remembered stories from her grandmother about the time before the peace. Dark stories. Terrible stories. Cannot sleep? She asked, when she saw Sunwoo at the window. Bad feeling, he admitted. Something in the air. Boyang nodded slowly. I feel it too. Like a storm coming. At that moment, the station's alarm began to scream. Sunwoo ran to the nearest window and looked out into space. His blood turned to ice. 40 warships hung in the darkness. Velith warships. Their weapons were glowing, pointed directly at the station. No, he whispered. This is a hospital. A voice crackled through the station's communication system. It was harsh and cold, speaking in accented common tongue. This is Warlord Keth of the Velith Dominion. You will hear my message. Humanity has grown soft and weak. Your peace is a lie. Your protection is worth nothing. Today, the galaxy will see what happens to those who trust in human promises. Admiral Tai-Ho's voice came through next, transmitted from Earth. Warlord Keth, this station is protected under the Covenant of Silence. It holds no soldiers. It holds only the sick and wounded. If you attack, you will become an enemy of every species in the galaxy. Keth laughed. It was an ugly sound. Empty words from an empty people. You have forgotten how to fight. You've forgotten what strength means. Let me remind you. First missiles struck the eastern wing. The explosion threw Sunwoo against the wall. He heard screaming, alarms, the terrible sound of metal tearing apart. He pushed himself up and began running toward the children's ward. Dr. Kang Yuna was already there. She was pulling children from their beds, pushing them toward the inner corridors where the walls were thicker. Her face was calm, but her hands were shaking. "Get them to the core," she shouted. The core has emergency shields. A second wave of missiles hit. Fire bloomed through the hallways. The ceiling collapsed in the west corridor, trapping a dozen patients beneath the rubble. Nurse Bae Minho crawled through the smoke, pulling bodies free, his eyes burning, his lungs screaming for air. He found the baby from the night before, the human infant. The parents were dead, crushed by a fallen beam. But the baby was alive, crying in the ruins. Minho grabbed the child and held her against his chest. "I have you," he gasped. "I have you." Another explosion. Closer this time. In the children's ward, Yuna saw a beam falling toward the Velith girl. Tira, without thinking, she threw herself forward, covering the child with her body. The beam struck. Old Nurse Boyang saw it happen. She saw Dr. Kang Yuna's body go still. She saw the little Velith girl crawling out from beneath her, unhurt but screaming. "Yuna," Boyong whispered. "Oh, Yuna." But there was no time to mourn. More missiles were coming. The attack lasted 11 minutes. 11 minutes of fire and death and screaming. When it was over, Sanctuary 7 was a ruin. Smoke poured from its broken hull. Bodies floated in the corridors. The silence was worse than the noise had been. Lieutenant Cho Sun-woo stood in the destroyed communication room, his uniform covered in blood that was not his own. He found a working camera. He did not know if anyone would receive his transmission, but he had to try. "This is Sanctuary 7, he said, his voice cracking. "We are a hospital. We had 2,000 patients. Now we have..." He stopped, swallowed. "We have 153. Everyone else is dead. 1,847 patients. 298 staff. Dead." He turned the camera to show the destruction behind him. The burning wards, the bodies. The Velith warships, still hanging in space, watching. "They bombed a hospital," Sun-woo said. "They killed children, killed the sick and the old and the healers who only wanted to help." Looked directly into the camera. "Humanity, Earth. Are you watching? Will you answer?" The transmission went out across the galaxy on Earth. Billions of people watched in silence. Families sat together, tears running down their faces. In the streets there was no noise, no anger, just a terrible, heavy quiet. Admiral Park Tae-ho watched the transmission in his office. His hands were shaking. Not with fear, not with sadness, with something older, something deeper. He stood and walked to the elevator that went down beneath the building, down to the vaults that had been sealed for 4,000 years. He placed his hand on the scanner. The doors opened with a sound like a giant taking a breath. Inside were screens. Thousands of screens, all dark. And in the center of the room, a single red button under a glass case. Tae-ho removed the glass. He looked at the button. He thought of Dr. Kang Yuna, who had died protecting a Velith child. He thought of the baby in Nurse Minho's arms. Thought of 4,000 years of peace, built with such hope, destroyed in 11 minutes. He pressed the button. All across Earth, all across human space, lights began to turn on. Ships that had slept for 40 centuries began to wake. Engines that had never been fired began to hum with power. Humanity had kept its promise for 4,000 years. Now that promise was broken. The Galactic Council met on the station called Unity, a massive ring floating between 3 stars. Representatives from 200 species sat in a great circular chamber, their faces projected on screens so all could see. The room was filled with noise, with anger, with fear. Counselor Yoon Hana stood at the center, alone. She was a small woman with gray hair and steady eyes. She had represented Earth for 30 years. In all that time, she had never raised her voice. She had never made threats. She had spoken only of cooperation, of peace, of shared futures. Today was different. "The Velith Dominion has attacked Sanctuary 7, she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. A hospital. A place of healing. They killed 1,847 patients. 298 medical workers. They killed children. The chamber was silent. For 4,000 years, humanity has kept the peace. We wrote the covenant of silence. We signed it first. We held to it when others broke small rules. We believed that patience was strength. We believed that mercy was power. She paused. When she spoke again, her voice was colder. We were not wrong, but we were not complete. She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every representative. You have all grown comfortable. You see humans as soft, gentle, unable to fight. You have forgotten why we chose peace in the first place. She touched a control on her podium. Behind her, a hologram appeared. It showed images from the Great War 4,000 years ago. Burning planets, shattered fleets, death on a scale that modern minds could not understand. This is what humanity was, Hannah said. This is what we chose to stop being. Not because we had to, because we wanted to. Because we looked at what we had done, and we were horrified by ourselves. The hologram changed. It now showed Sanctuary 7, burning and broken. But there are things that cannot be forgiven. There are lines that cannot be crossed. The Velith Dominion has crossed them. She straightened her shoulders. Humanity formally withdraws from the covenant of silence. We will handle this matter ourselves. The chamber exploded into noise. Representatives shouted, some in fear, some in protest. The Velith ambassador tried to speak, but Hannah simply turned off his microphone with a wave of her hand. You had your chance to stop this, she said to the council. You chose to do nothing. Now watch. She left the chamber without looking back on Earth. In a bunker beneath Geneva, Admiral Park Tai-ho stood before a room full of officers. They were all old. The youngest was 50. They had spent their entire lives studying war without ever fighting one. Now, the moment they had trained for had finally arrived. The archive fleet is awake, Tai-ho said. 12,000 ships. Technology that we have continued to develop in secret for 4,000 years, while the rest of the galaxy believed we had forgotten how to build weapons. General M. Kunko stepped forward. He was 62 years old with a face like carved stone. His family had been warriors for 10,000 years. They had kept the knowledge alive, passed down from generation to generation, waiting for the day it would be needed again. Our ships are faster than anything the Velith have, Kunho said. Our weapons are more powerful. Our shields are stronger. We did not sleep during the peace. We prepared. We do not want to become what we were, Tai-ho said heavily. We will fight. We will win. But we will not become monsters. Chief Engineer Seo spoke up. He was a thin man with tired eyes who had spent 40 years maintaining ships he never expected to be used. The fleet can be fully operational in 72 hours. The crews are ready. The weapons are charged. Tai-ho nodded slowly. He looked around the room at the faces of men and women who had inherited a terrible responsibility. Our ancestors swore we would never start a war, he said. They said nothing about finishing one. The orders went out. Across human space, recruitment centers that had been empty for centuries suddenly filled with volunteers. They were not angry young men looking for glory. They were teachers and doctors and farmers and engineers. They were grandparents and parents and children. They came not because they wanted to fight, because they could not stand by while hospitals were bombed. Nurse Bae Minho was among them. He had survived the attack on Sanctuary 7. He had carried that baby through the fire. Now, he stood in a recruitment office on Earth, still wearing bandages on his arms. I am a nurse, he told the officer. I do not want to kill anyone, but I want to be there. I want to help. They made him a combat medic. They gave him a uniform and a med kit. On his chest, he pinned a small piece of burned cloth. It was from the flag of Sanctuary 7. In the Velith Dominion, Warlord Keth celebrated his victory. He had shown the galaxy that humans were weak. He had proven that their peace meant nothing. Now other species would follow his lead. The Dominion would expand. The old order would fall. Then his intelligence officer brought him a report. The officer's hands were shaking. The humans have a fleet, the officer said. A hidden fleet. 12,000 ships. Keth laughed. Impossible. They destroyed all their weapons. They lied. The officer put the data on the screen. They have been building in secret for 4,000 years. Their technology is beyond anything we have ever seen. Keth stared at the screen. For the first time in his life, he felt something cold in his chest. A message arrived. It was from a Velith who had defected to the humans years ago. An ambassador named Rin, who had always warned that humanity was not what it seemed. The message was simple. You woke them up. You have no idea what you have done. Run, Keth. Run as far as you can. It will not save you, but it might give you a few more days. Keth deleted the message. He told himself it was a bluff, but that night he could not sleep. And in the darkness of space, 12,000 human warships began to move. They flew in perfect formation, their engines burning like stars. At the head of the fleet, Admiral Park Taiho looked out at the endless black. "We gave you peace," he whispered to the Velith, who could not hear him. "You answered with fire. Now we will teach you why we chose peace in the first place. We chose it because the alternative was too terrible to imagine." He gave the order. The fleet jumped to hyperspace. The war had begun. The Battle of Korath Nebula lasted 6 hours. When it was over, the Velith Dominion's entire frontier fleet was gone. Captain Shinarium flew her fighter through the wreckage, her heart cold and steady. She was 34 years old. Her younger sister had been a nurse on Sanctuary 7. Now her sister was dead, and Arium was here to answer for that death. But not with cruelty. With precision, all pilots confirmed targets, she said into her communicator. Military vessels only. I repeat, military only. Any ship showing civilian markings is to be left alone. Her squadron responded with confirmation. They had all lost someone. They all wanted revenge. But they were human, and humans had rules. The Velith had expected savages. They had expected wild attacks, blind anger, chaos. Instead, they found something far more terrifying. They found discipline. Human ships moved through space like dancers. They knew exactly where to strike, exactly when to pull back. Their weapons cut through Velith shields like they were made of paper. Technology 4,000 years ahead of anything the Dominion had ever seen. Strategist N.A. Duyon watched the battle from the command ship, his screens showing the movement of every vessel. He was 40 years old, thin and quiet, with eyes that saw patterns where others saw only chaos. He had designed Operation Silent Thunder, and it was working perfectly. Their command ship is trying to retreat, an officer reported. Let it go, Doyon said. We want survivors. We want them to tell others what they saw. The officer looked surprised. Sir, we are not here to kill every Velith, Doyon explained. We are here to end their ability to make war. Dead soldiers tell no stories. Living soldiers spread fear. Velith command ship escaped. It carried 300 survivors back to the Dominion. Every one of them was in shock. Every one of them would tell the same story. The humans were unstoppable, and they were not even trying their hardest. Warlord Keth received the news in his palace. He sat alone in the darkness, staring at nothing. His frontier fleet was gone. 72 hours. That was all it had taken for humanity to destroy a defense network that had taken 50 years to build. He gathered his full armada, 3,000 ships, everything the Dominion had. He would meet the humans at the Velith border and crush them with overwhelming numbers. Admiral Taiho received word of Keth's gathering forces. He was not worried. They still do not understand, he said to General Kyuncho. They think this is about numbers. It was never about numbers. The two fleets met at the edge of Velith space. 3,000 Velith warships faced 12,000 human vessels. The Velith outnumbered the humans in soldiers. But war was not about counting bodies. The battle began at dawn. By human clocks, Captain Shinarium led the first strike wing. They punched through the Velith formation like a knife through water. Their targets were specific. Engine systems, weapon platforms, command centers. Nothing else. Why are they not bombing our cities? A Velith officer asked his commander. They could destroy our homeworld and ours. No one had an answer. Admiral Taiho broadcast a message on all frequencies. His voice was calm, almost gentle. People of the Velith Dominion, hear me. We are not here to destroy you. We are not here to kill your children or burn your homes. We do not bomb hospitals. We do not murder the helpless. We are not you. He paused. You're here to remove your ability to hurt anyone ever again. Your military will be dismantled. Your weapons will be destroyed. Your warlords will face justice. But your people will live. Your planet will remain. This is the human way. The message spread across Velith space. Many did not believe it. They waited for the bombs to fall on their cities. The bombs never came. Instead, human ships destroyed every military base, every weapons factory, every warship in the Dominion. They did it with surgical precision. They sent medical ships behind the battle lines to treat wounded Velith soldiers. They dropped supplies on planets that had been cut off by the fighting. The galaxy watched in disbelief. They are winning, the Altari ambassador said at the Galactic Council, and they are showing mercy. How is this possible? Because they remember, Counselor Yun Hana replied. She had returned to the council to observe. 4,000 years ago, we forgot mercy. We killed without thought. We burned without reason. And when it was over, we looked at what we had done, and we swore, never again. Not never again would we fight. Never again would we lose ourselves. The war lasted 3 months. By the end, the Velith Dominion had no military left. Their homeworld was surrounded by human ships, but not a single weapon was pointed at civilian targets. Warlord Keth stood on his balcony, watching human vessels fill his sky. He had expected death. He had expected his planet to burn the way Sanctuary 7 had burned. Instead, he received a message from Admiral Taiho. Surrender yourself for trial. Your people will not be harmed. Your world will not be touched. This is our promise. Keth laughed bitterly. And if I refuse, then we will wait. We have time. And every day you wait, your people will see human ships in their sky. And they will know that we could destroy them but choose not to. They will ask themselves why they followed a warlord who brought them to ruin. Eventually, they will bring you to us themselves. Keth considered fighting to the death. It would have been the Velith way. But he looked out at his city, at the millions of lives that depended on his choice, and he found he could not condemn them all for his pride. I will surrender, he said, but I do not understand. We destroyed your hospital. We killed your healers. Your children. Why do you not take revenge? Taiho's response was quiet. 'Cause revenge would make us like you. And we spent 4,000 years trying to be better than that. Dr. Kong Yuna died protecting a Velith child. If we burned your cities, we would betray everything she stood for. He ended the transmission. Keth stood alone in his palace, waiting for the humans to come. And for the first time in his life, he felt shame. 6 months had passed since the war ended. Warlord Keth stood in a courtroom on Unity Station, facing judges from 30 different species. He did not speak in his own defense. There was nothing to say. The evidence was clear. The recordings of Sanctuary 7's destruction had been played for the entire galaxy. Every scream, every explosion, every dying child. The sentence was not death. Humanity had asked for something different. Keth was sent to a prison world at the edge of known space. His cell had one window and one screen. Every day that screen would show him recordings. The faces of every patient who had died on Sanctuary 7, their names. Their stories, the lives they had lived before he ended them. He would watch for the rest of his life. Some called it cruel. Admiral Taiho called it justice. Death is easy, he explained to the council. It ends quickly. But Keth must live with what he did. He must see their faces every morning when he wakes and every night before he sleeps. He must understand that they were real, that they mattered, that he took something from the universe that can never be replaced. The Velith Dominion was no more. Its government had fallen. New leaders rose, Moderate voices who had always opposed Keth but had been too afraid to speak. They faced a broken nation. Their military was gone. Their economy was shattered. Their people were hungry and afraid. Humanity could have left them to suffer. Instead, they sent aid. Ships arrived at Velith worlds carrying food, medicine, building materials. Human engineers helped rebuild power stations. Human doctors treated the sick. Human teachers opened schools. Why? The new Velith leader asked Counselor Yunhana. We attacked you. We killed your people. Why would you help us? Hannah looked out at the city below them. It was scarred from the war, but lights were beginning to come on again. Because hate is a fire that burns everything it touches, she said. If we abandon you now, your children will grow up hungry and angry. They will blame humanity for their suffering. In 20 years, we will have another war. Another Keth. More death. She turned to face him. But if we help you rebuild, your children will grow up knowing that humans could have destroyed them and chose kindness instead. They will remember. And perhaps when they are old enough to lead, they will choose kindness too. The Velith leader was silent for a long moment. Then he bowed his head. We do not deserve this mercy. No, Hannah agreed. But mercy is not about deserving. It is about choosing who we want to be. On Eris 4, where Sanctuary 7 had once floated, a new station was being built. It was larger than the original, with wards for 5,000 patients. Its name was carved above the main entrance in 50 languages. Sanctuary. 8. Nurse Bei Minho walked through the unfinished corridors, remembering the fire, the smoke, the weight of a baby in his arms. He had come back to help with the construction. Soon, he would work here again, doing what he had always done, healing, helping, caring. Old Nurse Oboyong had survived the attack. She was 80 now, too old to work full shifts, but she came to the station every day to train new nurses. Tell them about Dr. Kong, she would say. Tell them what she did. Tell them why this place matters. And they did. Admiral Park Tai-ho retired after the war. He had done what was needed. Now he wanted only quiet. He bought a small house by the ocean on Earth and spent his days walking on the beach, listening to the waves. Once a year, he traveled to Eris 4 to visit the memorial. A simple wall with names carved into it. 1,847 patients. 298 staff. Dr. Kong Yuna's name was near the top. He would stand there for hours, saying nothing, remembering everything, at the Galactic Council. Counselor Yun Hannah proposed a new treaty. The Second Covenant. Like the first, it promised peace. But unlike the first, it had teeth. Humanity will serve as its protector, she said. Not as conquerors. Not as rulers. As guardians. Any species that attacks hospitals, kills civilians, or breaks the laws of war will face us. Not with blind anger. With justice, Council voted. Every species agreed. Even the Velith. The galaxy had a new order now. And at its center was a simple idea. Some things were sacred. Some lines could never be crossed. And humanity, the species that had once been the most violent in the galaxy, would make sure those lines were protected. On Sanctuary 8, Nurse Minho completed his first shift in the new children's ward. The station was finally open, accepting patients from across the galaxy. The beds were clean. The equipment was new. The air smelled like hope. One of his patients was a young Velith girl. She was 7 years old now, with wide eyes and a shy smile. Her name was Tira. The child Dr. Kong had died protecting. Tira had been adopted by a human family after the war. She was learning to speak English and Korean. She wanted to be a doctor when she grew up. Nurse Minho, she said, tugging at his sleeve. Can I ask you something? He knelt down to her level. Of course. Why did humans help us? After what the Dominion did? Her eyes were troubled. Some Velith say, we do not deserve it. Minho thought for a long moment. He thought of the fire and the screaming. He thought of the baby he had carried through the smoke. He thought of Dr. Kang, throwing herself over this very child to save her life. 4,000 years ago, he said, humans learned something important. Cruelty is easy. Anyone can hurt. Anyone can destroy. But kindness after someone hurts you, mercy after they betray you, that is strength. That is power. He put his hand gently on her shoulder. Dr. Kang died to save you. Not because you were human or Velith, because you were a child who needed help. That is what we believe. That is who we try to be. Tira nodded slowly. Then she hugged him, her small arms tight around his neck. I want to be like that, she whispered. I want to help people too, Minho smiled. Then you will. I believe in you. Outside the window, ships from 100 species docked peacefully at the station. Stars burned in the infinite darkness, and somewhere in the hearts of billions of beings across the galaxy, a simple truth had taken root. Humanity had broken 4,000 years of peace, but not because they loved war. They had broken it because some things, some people, were worth protecting. And the galaxy had learned that the species they once called soft had only ever been gentle by choice. When they chose not to be gentle, the universe trembled. But when the fighting was over, they chose kindness again. And that, more than any weapon or warship, was their greatest strength. The stars watched in silence. And for the first time in a very long time, the silence was not empty. It was full of hope.